Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In case you are new, my name is Hannah and this channel is all about books. Hello, this is me after I finished filming and I just want to apologize because I don't know what has come over me, but I got so delirious filming this video and I have no idea what I said. And I won't know until I start editing. So I just want to apologize. My editing self is going to salvage this video as much as she can. But I was just talking complete nonsense this entire video. I have no idea what I said and I just want to apologize for that. But I hope you like the books that I recommend. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. I think because it's so hot. Bye. I feel like everyone at one point has been humbled by the Spotify daylist. If you don't know, it's sort of this AI generated playlist that Spotify creates and it basically sums up your day in music, and they have some pretty outrageous playlist names. And so I sort of got the idea that I'm going to give you guys hyper specific book recommendations based off my Spotify daylist that I've got over the last few weeks. So the first daylist title that I got was Obsessed Situationship, and as I was looking through my books trying to work out what sort of book fits that bill perfectly, the only sort of book that came to my mind, and if you're new to this channel you don't quite understand my relationship with this series, but this series that I'm about to mention is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. Everyone else that is subscribed is probably going to be sick of me talking about these series of books, but I can't help it. They're just everywhere for me. Like I just think about it a lot. For those who don't know, Magnolia Parks is a book that I love to hate, but I also hate to love. In fact, this isn't a book with an obsessed situationship. It's a book that I have an obsessed situationship with, because some days I love it, some days I hate it. And I know for a fact right now I am talking complete utter nonsense and I'm just saying words. So I'm just going to get into the synopsis about this book, which follows our main character, Magnolia Park, and she's sort of this socialite in London. She's the nepo babies of all nepo babies, and she is in this weird sort of situationship with the male lead, BJ Valentine, and they have sort of been together since the early days of high school. They're sort of childhood best friends. They've known each other for years, and they're in this sort of Ross and Rachel, will they, won't they, or they have done it and they're trying to work out if they get back together. And they're both obsessed with each other, let's just say that. Like, they're sort of in their minds, they both know that they're gonna end up together again. It's just working their way back together, and they're obsessed with each other, but they're also just in the worst. They put themselves in like the worst situations ever, and they're not a complete sort of relationship until further on in the series, which is a huge spoiler, I'm aware, but you sort of get the gist if that's the sort of book you're signing up for. But yeah, it is probably one of my favorite. I don't really know what genre to put it in, because for a long time I've sort of been saying it's a romance, but I don't think it is, and I'm a bit reluctant to call it women's fiction, but it's sort of in the romance realm, but more in like a new adult. It's not really romance though. It's more about their relationships, which I guess is a romance, but it doesn't have the romance tropes, you know? I don't know. I'm sick to death of talking about Magnolia Parks, but I can't help it, and I do it to myself. The next book I have is, the next daylist title I have is Emotional Scream. And so when I was thinking about this book, at first I thought it was going to be like a cathartic scream, like but you feel good after it. But to me, emotional is like you're upset, you're like emotional, and you just have to scream. And the book that I thought of is actually one that I'm currently reading, and that is The Poppy War by R.F Kuang. This book, I sort of started reading this book knowing that it's going to emotionally devastate me, and I don't want to say too much because I'm not that far into the series. I'm only up halfway through the first book, but I'm already feeling all of the emotions and I'm already getting scared because I know, I don't want to spoil it, but I know a character is going to die, and I sort of thought it was going to happen later in the series, but it seems like it's happening now as we speak, and I'm not ready for that. I don't think I can deal with that. I'm not ready. I'm scared. And I'm about to scream. Anyway, for those who don't know, the Poppy War follows a girl named Rin, and in order to escape an arranged marriage, she enrolls herself into this war academy where she's going to be training to be a female warrior. She's also blessed with a certain type of magic. I don't want to get too much into it, so I don't want to spoil it. And I'm also like halfway through the first book, so I don't actually have that much to offer in terms of plot. But her country sort of falls into a war that she's been preparing for, essentially. I am obsessed with all the characters so far in this book, and I have been spoiled for it, which is why I'm like, I don't want to spoil it for other people. But all I know is that a character that I love, well, not really love, like, he's fine. A character that I kind of like is going to die, and I'm like I'm trying not to like them, but I can't help myself. I can't help but like them, and I'm scared. I'm so scared, and I just want to scream, hence the emotional scream. That's all I'm gonna say because I don't want to say too much, and it was a bit of a cop-out answer, but oh well. The next book, the next playlist, I'm gonna keep doing that this entire video, but the next playlist I have was Bitter Power. It was actually meant to be Bitter Power Ballad, but I think Bitter Power fits better, and I have the perfect book. I have no idea what genre it is. Because it's fantasy, yeah, I'm gonna call it a fantasy, but there's actually not any magic in it, but it's like set in a different world, but there's no magic. So it is a fantasy, but it's also like not, because there's no magic. And I feel like if it's gonna be a fantasy, it has to have magic. And that's just my own definition of fantasy. That's probably wrong, dead wrong, but I just feel like it should. Anyway, the book I have is the Captive Prince trilogy by who? I don't know. Let me Google. Sorry, guys. Captive. I know it starts with a P. Captive Prince. Prince? Yeah. The amount of times I say Cruel Prince. C.S. Pacat. The Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat. So The Captive Prince is about a prince who is held captive. Pretty self-explanatory, that title. So The Captive Prince follows Damon, who is like this warrior prince, and he is the rightful heir to his country. But when his half-brother seizes power, Damon gets captured and is basically sold as a slave to his enemies. However, his enemies don't know that he's in fact the prince of the opposite country. They just think he's some warrior being held captive. And this book is all about political intrigue. It's also a gay romance. Not really. I wouldn't call it a romance. It is more of enemies to lovers, but the lovers comes later. I would say they're just enemies right now, hence the bitterness. And honestly, I devoured these 3 books. They were so good, and I really recommend it, and I really wish more people were talking about it, because oh my gosh, it is the enemies to lovers of all enemies to lovers, and Laurent is just a bitter little prince. But he has every right to be, don't get me wrong. I feel like that book encapsulates Bitter Power quite well. I'm sorry I'm rambling. It's the end of a day. My tongue is tired. And it's tired. Okay, so the next playlist I have is Rainy Day Romanticized. So a book that feels like a rainy day when you're reading it. And I have just the book. And you're probably so sick of me talking about Ava Reid, but I am going to talk about Ava Reid. I'm going to talk about A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. This book is the most atmospheric book I've ever read. It is sort of like a gothic, I don't want to say gothic fairy tale, a gothic novel mixed with a dark academia novel. It follows our main character Effie, who is an architectural student. She wins this competition to rebuild one of her favorite author's house. And when she gets to this house to start doing the plans for it, everything's not quite as it seems, and she's working alongside a literary student from her college named Preston, and he's writing a paper on the author who just passed away, and he's sort of uncovering secrets about this author, and she starts to work alongside him in that front. I think as well, because of the title Drowning, there is a lot of like rainy scenes. It is a book that you sort of wanna, it's like if you're a mood reader, you're going to like this book, because if you're after a specific mood, you're going to want to read this book, because if you're after a book that feels like you want to read it on a rainy day, Study in Drowning is definitely that book. Yeah, I really liked it. It has sort of a mixed review, but if you're a fan of Ava Reid's writing, you're probably going to like this book. The next playlist is actually one of my favorite names, and it's Ethereal Yearning. Yearning is just the perfect word. Ethereal is the perfect word. I actually have 2 recs for this book because I couldn't really decide, and one of them is a book I liked it, but I also just didn't enjoy it that much. But it does fit into this vibe. The first book is one I really, really loved, and I have spoken a bit about it on this channel, but that first book is Fairydale by Veronica Lancet. So this book follows our main character Darcy, who is an orphan and a teacher in Boston, and she gets this mysterious letter basically telling her that her father has died. Her father, who she didn't know about, has died, and she has an inheritance from him. And the only way she can get this inheritance is if she goes to the town he lived in, which was called Fairydale. Fairydale's a really, really strange town. It's not on the map. It doesn't have a train station. Things are just not adding up, and when she finally gets there, everything is not what it seems at all, and it's quite a strange place. There's this feeling of she's being watched, she's being followed. It is similar to Study in Drowning in the terms that it's a gothic sort of feel to it, but yeah, there's 2 main love interests, and they definitely yearn for her. They sure do. There's a lot of yearning in this book. Fairydale's one of those books that when you get halfway through and you're sitting at the halfway point, you're wondering how things are going, things still aren't quite making sense, and then all of a sudden the tables turn and the plot slowly starts to unravel. It is nothing, like, it's such an original story, if that makes sense, and I've read nothing like it. It is an amazing book. It has a bit of everything in it. So it's got that dark gothic fairy tale vibes. It's also got a historical romance aspect to it, bit of horror, bit of paranormal, bit of romance, of course, lots and lots of yearning, fantasy. It's a really like all-encompassing book. So the next book that sort of fits into this ethereal yearning playlist title is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. This book was sort of marketed to me as being similar to Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, but I found it had a way more creative spin on dragons than Rebecca Yarros. And not to throw shade at her, those who don't know, it follows Reid, who is sort of this bounty hunter. She's not a bounty hunter. She gets chased by a bounty hunter. She's part of a rebellion group, and she's basically an assassin for a group of rebels. And she gets hunted by this bounty hunter who catches her and throws her into prison. And in order to get out, she works alongside a king named Khan. They're looking for these objects called moon shards, which were I think they're from the dragons. Honestly, I can't really remember this book that much. The world building was crazy. I did say I didn't like this book, and I didn't hate it, but I just felt like I needed way more detail for me to fully immerse myself into it. But it does, I can't say too much about it without spoiling it, but it does fit into the yearning aspect so well. Alright, so the next day list I had was People Pleaser Scream. And I was quite offended by Spotify when I saw this, because I was like, is Spotify calling me a people pleaser? Because if they are, That's a bit rude. The book series is a series that I had for this, is the Addicted series by Becca and Krista Ritchie. The Addicted series is basically a way more likable Magnolia Parks. It does follow the lives of two Nepo babies, Lauren Hale and Lily Calloway. Lily has a sex addiction and Lauren has an alcohol addiction, and they're sort of hiding their addictions by being in this fake relationship. So the media and their parents are only thinking about their relationship and not about their true issues. These two characters, well, mainly Lily Calloway, she's the biggest people pleaser I've ever met in a book. She's my favorite. She's honestly such a good character. They're both great characters. They're not being their true selves, and they're trying to make they really want to make their family happy, so they neglect themselves a lot, which I think is sort of what led to most of their addictions. All right, so the next one I got really confused me. I got Makeout Art Deco, and I had to Google what Art Deco was because I knew vaguely what it was, but I was a bit confused. Anyway, it's an architectural style that came to popularity during the 1920s. And as for the makeout part, I was basically just looking for a book with a romance in it. And I was trying to think of books I have read that was set in sort of the 1920s because I feel like that suits the vibe. And I could not think of any until this gem entered my mind, and that is The Diviniers by Libby Bray. I forgot about this book. Want to know why? Because I've read the first book, loved it, and there was supposed to be a sequel, but it never came. It's basically a fantasy murder mystery set in the 1920s. Evie moves in with her uncle at New York City, and she sort of uses her powers that she is trying to keep hidden to solve the murders her uncle is solving. That's the only book that sort of came to mind. I don't actually know if it fits the bill of the daylist, but let me know in the comments if you remember this book, because it's weirdly like ingrained in my memory and I need to reread it. I need to know if it still stands for the test of time, if you know what I'm saying. And I need to read the sequel because I remember I finished the book and I was like, okay, time to read the next one. Go to the library. It was not there. And I was like, is there going to be a second book? And everyone said, no, we've been waiting for years. And then I was like, damn, okay, great. And apparently there is a sequel, so that's exciting. That's great news, guys. Finally. I can't talk. I literally can't talk because it's been 2 years since my first book came out, and I have no desire right now to write the second one, and I apologize for that. Guys, my camera is about to die and I'm so scared. I'm not going to finish this video because I just want to finish it today so it's out of the way. Anyway, my very, very last day list that I have is a demure situationship, which I was trying to think who's a very demure to me is sort of wholesome, not really wholesome, but a classy couple, but they're still sort of in a situation. They're not quite together. That's my definition of a situationship anyway. And I wanted to do a happier romance than Magnolia and the Addicted series. So I have Funny Story by Miss Emily Henry. This is my favorite Emily Henry book. I really, really enjoyed this one. The reason I'm calling them a situationship because they don't get together until like a bit halfway through, which is pretty classic for a romance novel, but they're in a situationship because they are roommates and they have a complicated past in the terms that they know each other's exes. They were sort of stuff like that, and now their exes are together. It's a confusing book. They're in a confusing time, but I really, really enjoyed this book, and they're so demure. I don't actually know what demure means because I had a playlist before which was Demure Brat Summer, and I just feel like Demure and Brat don't really go together, so I picked this one instead, which was Demure Situationship. Anyway, love Funny Story, love Emily Henry. I'm sorry if this was a quick quick recommendation, that's because this camera is about to die, and I'm so sorry. So that concludes this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and comment some of your humbling Spotify daylist. I would love to hear some of the other titles. Anyway, goodbye.